always want to do that. Welcome, everybody. This is the weekly call for, no, the every 2 weeks call for the coordination of rapid diffs. And I'll go straight to the agenda if I can find it. There it is. So since this is the beginning of the milestone, we just started 17.1. I thought it'd be useful to have a bit of a snapshot update on what work is in flight for rapid diffs. Want to give a bit of an update on the things that slipped from 17.0. Still ongoing. We have the 3-layer front-end architecture and wrapping up the reviews, I guess, on the view components work. And decoupling MRDiffs components from UX. That's ongoing. It's a bit more complex than we expect. But I think the Haml at least should be pretty close to being wrapped up, if not wrapped up, Stas, right? It's close.
It's very close.
Cool. In the 3-layer architecture, we're having a bunch of like front-end discussions that might be delaying that a little bit, I believe. For the new work coming into 17.1, I think this is the milestone where we get a bit more volume in work being assigned. So I think that's a good sign. We have 3 spikes. First, trying the new Gitly RPC. Please stop if you have any questions on any one of these issues. Okay, so we can discuss it. We're going to be trying out the new Gitly RPC with the streaming proof of concept. This is just a spike to test to see if the RPC is what we need, if it has any gaps or anything. We'll be scheduling the work to implement it next time. We have an investigation to how frontend can sprinkle user-specific data on diffs. This is a bit of some open questions we have. How we'll make that information available from the backend to the front end. Can the server-side rendered carry already some data in it, or do we have to get separate calls? I believe that's it, Stas. Correct me if I'm wrong. The next, it's an investigation, which is a bit technical, about testing a client-side toggle between inline and parallel, which is what we do today, like go from one line to one mode to the other without refreshing the whole page. But this essentially, it's more about a deeper question. How do we do big transformations of the DOM if it's server-side rendered? What does it mean for caching? Do we have to cache all different versions of the server-side rendered? Can we do transformations somewhere outside of the cache? So it's a more of a bigger question that we have that we're going to do some spec to investigate. We have view components coming in for diff file viewers. So this is the part, it's like the meaty part of the diffs, like inside the little box of the file. It's basically like the lines and everything like that. We'll be writing new viewers for it. Again, this will be a long journey, but it's like a first pass on this. We might come back to these at a later stage to improve or as we need. Yeah. We're going to be adding basic accessibility test coverage to rapid diffs. I think this is the only one that went to source code, if I'm not mistaken. So essentially, we're going to be adding some tests to start getting a sense on our accessibility compliance very early on, and then we'll come back later to improve it later. The next one is going to be supporting rendering a small chunk of MR diffs on the page. This is because the server-side render will come with a set of diffs pre-rendered. And we're going to see how we want to implement that. We're going to be adding a diff streaming endpoint for merge requests. So each page will have a different streaming endpoint. This is to stream the server-side rendered data to the front end. And right now, we will still be using the old integration with the old code base, I guess, with Gitly access and persistence on the database. But later on, when we update the RPC of Gitly consumption, this endpoint will benefit from that work. So this is just setting the first step to test these modes, because MRs are persistent on the database, or at least some of them are. So we're going to start there. It's a simpler case throughout the stack. And the last bit is a bit of a decision between streaming a paginated approach and performance testing, I expect. And do we need a front-end assignee Stanislav there for the last one?
Not really. I think we have 2 different POCs for each of the approach.
Okay.
So we just need to load it with lots of data.
Let's do it. All right. And if he needs to nag somebody, he'll know who to nag for the front end. So we'll find. Questions on that plan? Anything that isn't clear? Does it sound good?
I think the sixth issue is more of a backend focused one. Um, I can work on it. Like there's no issue with that, but I think I'll need Patrick's help for this specifically.
Oh, I think I know what happened. I think that's on me. So I have a comment from Francois 5 days ago, switching back into front end for capacity purposes. I think this was meant to go to Phil, right? That's why we changed. So we have this problem right now because Phil is full stack, but he's in the front end team. So the work is back end, but it's going to the front end team. So kind of like been overloading the labels a little bit too much there. But I'll revise that, Stas, and I'll see. I'll check with Phil if we need to swap anything out. Good call. All right, that's it for that. The next part is just a bit of an FYI to make sure that we're okay with the restructuring. So Stanislav reorganized the epics and moved the issues under each bucket, I guess. Of course, right now we're all focused on foundation, all focused on that stage 0, getting things off the ground, answering the questions. But there's links for each one of them and the links to the MVC there. I feel like this reflects what we talked about last time, but just wanted to make sure if that is clear to everybody and okay for now.
I think that's fine. It's also way more helpful than just the full list before. And I also have noticed that we basically have half of the stage 0 stuff in the current milestone. So I don't know how ambitious we're just being here, but it also maybe it feels like that whole epic's maybe less long than it appeared to me initially. I don't know. I guess we'll see at the end of this milestone as well. But yeah.
I think it's important to understand there's probably some issues that haven't been created yet because we don't know them yet. It's like the unknown unknowns, right? We still don't know we don't know them. Some of them we do, but we haven't created issues for it. But I think most of them have issues covered. So there might still be work uncovered. So don't take the size of the epic as a final thing. We just know where to put them once we create them. But and I'm not saying that we're going to have double the number of these issues. I'm just saying that there might be at least 3 or 4, 5 other issues that need to be created still along the way as we uncover them as we go forward. But we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thanks. It makes sense.
Cool. Francois, you have the
Yeah,
next
I had
one?
the next point here. I was looking again at the this is a lot of rapid this, right? It's in the name. Rapid needs to be fast and stuff, so we need to have numbers. So I was looking at the acceptance criteria from the blueprint again, and I was kind of curious to know when we were thinking to dig into some of these metrics, like upload, and maybe we haven't seen it because haven't joined. I joined the project later, but time to first diff, what are all these things? Especially, I'm curious about like what are our baselines for all of these? Um, I saw a lot of issues in stage 2 that seem to be kind of about that. Like there's a lot of metric stuff in there and instrumentation and all of that. So I'm just curious, is that the stage where we actually start digging more closely into this? Is there value in looking early in that? I don't know. I'm just like, how do we think about, validating the impact basically, right? Like having baselines, measuring all that stuff.
This is a great question. I'll add that part of the adding accessibility tests is already covering part of the acceptance criteria. The other part, some of the things you see here, for example, the time to first diff, that is something that we already have in the merge requests diffs that we want to port at some point to the rapid diffs. I'm not entirely sure if they will come by the natural migration of code or rewriting of things, or if we actually have to special issues for this. But it's a what we call it performance timings API mark, I think, that we have already in the app. So if you open the console, when you render an MR with the performance bar enabled, you'll see them logging to the browser console. And that is the timing reference that we want to get to. When we get to that point before the 3 seconds mark, We've talked about having some linters or some validators to make sure that we accomplish the benchmarks we've set ourselves for the kilobytes of JavaScript compressed and the markup compressed as well. We did some experimentation already with the current implementation that Stanislav has to see how much compression gzip actually gets us. But there was another compression algorithm, Stanislav, that we considered.
We talked about gzip versus broadly.
Broadly.
I think that's kind of a bike shading thing because
They're
gzip
both great.
already offers us 95% compression.
Yeah.
And if you go past that, it's just like not really meaningful for us.
Splitting hairs. But this means that what goes into the cache is already gzip, so a lot of this benefits the overall stack. But we don't have yet a decision on how we're going to be enforcing this. I think we have some mechanisms to assess the size of bundles and stuff like that. So I think probably at a certain point we'll configure those to test it. You had another question. The baselines, was that it? How we set them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think you answered some of my question. I mean, actually, the time to first diff, it says before 3 seconds. That's already actually that is a baseline in a way. That's like it's a target in some ways. I guess if I'm imagining someone who's like never seen this project ever, like it'd be nice to show them this is like I don't know, like even a distribution of like time to first diff before and this is after. Look how much nicer it is. It's all the way to the left and very fast and whatever. And so I'm just kind of thinking, do we have the data for this already, or is that something we need to collect early? If it's not, then that's fine. Sounds like we can do it later. So yeah.
So what are the challenges we have with these things? Like depends on what MR you're testing, right? So you should keep testing the same MR. We've had a dashboard with statistics using site speed reports in the past, but that went dead, and we're trying to recover them in some way. That was the instance that was testing production directly and was really useful for that reason. It was testing production and keeping a record of that. I think our best choice at the moment is the 10K reference architecture test they do on nightlies. In essence, right now, that will render the diffs with the default mode. So imagine at a certain point we'll flip the feature flag or whatever to replace the diffs on the MRs, and we'll be able to see the comparison between one and the other. The tricky part is that we won't be able to see those reports until we do that in the code. So that's why the other dashboard was so useful, was because we could add a link to a specific project in production, turn the feature flag on that project, and we would see the shift of the metrics. So that is not part of this project, but it is something that we might want to prioritize as an engineering team from our side to recover for the well-being of everybody, including rapid diffs.
And what was the name of this thing? How did you call it? Sorry, I missed it.
It's site speed. The tool is site speed. We had it on dashboards, gitlab.org or dashboards. Trying to remember the link, but I changed browsers, so I don't have the history. Dashboard, gitlab.net. That's where we had the dashboards, but something happened recently and it broke. I'll get on that and try to provide an update.
I wanted
let's
to
put an item on
answer
the agenda.
the when part. So you asked when we expect to dig into those. And there is a specific reason why I put it into stage 2. So actually, we can place these metrics right now because we already rendered diffs on the page. But these metrics will be meaningless because we are not doing any useful work on the page, right? So it makes sense to add all the heavy features to the diffs first and then start instrumenting these things. And then we'll see actual impact on the performance.
You're saying the comparison right now would be invalid. Yeah.
What's the main, like looking at the main epic that was created by Phil initially. So what's the main outcome that we seek from all of this work? Is it improving rendering performance. And if that is the case, probably we need like just to like whether we use like the same MRs with the way that like the old stack works and then like measure it against improvements that we're making. I think it's just like we need to have some sort of like just baseline success metric, let's say, that we set, right? Like, okay, so the goal of this entire initiative is to make sure that we're improving performance on like rendering the diff. So we're expecting to have, either we want to put it as like a percentage or like, reducing by X the amount of time, but like we should set just like some sort of outcome that we can measure towards. I don't like, for me, like Stas, what you're saying, it's not as much about whether we do it like in phase 0 or phase 2. It's, are we going to be able to show as we're making progress at some point that like this is like the rendering, like metrics that we have, when we started this, and this is where we're at right now, right? Like that's the kind of like visualization I think that would be good. And to Francois's point, I think like it would be like for someone who doesn't have context, right, who's coming in and saying, hey, why are you investing all of this time in this work? Like we should just like align on like, okay, there's an outcome that we're seeking here. It's a performance gain of X, and we're going to measure it using, like a certain set of MRs that are measured, like the same MRs are measured against the old stack and the new stack. Something like that.
Yeah, understandable, and I think we need to work on that.
But are you saying like what I'm trying to understand is like, are you saying that if we put back online this previous dashboard, that would give us the old stack information that we need to be able to like show the like the difference, let's say, or like the improvement?
That's a very important, well, it's a great question with a very weird answer, because those site speed tools will give us the standardized metrics. And one of the things I wanted to pull was here on the blueprint, we wrote down the goals of the project. Motivation, I guess, is to improve perceived performance, improve maintainability, and have a consistent coverage of all scenarios. So right now we don't have this. So this is a new thing, which would be rolling out with this project. Improved maintainability is harder to measure, but I think we can translate this into, I guess, higher velocity of delivering features, which is going to take a while. It's a lagging indicator, so it's going to take a while to get there. And the thorny, weird answer is this one. Perceived performance is really hard to track on those site speed dashboards. I think I have some of these here, because what this will give us is the standardized performance metrics, which is the LCP, the TBT, all of those things. So for example, if you go to merge request changes, which is the Diffs tab, we'll have a bunch of metrics here giving us like some numbers. But does this equate to a perceived performance improvement? Not necessarily. It will definitely help us understand, for example, here, MR diffs mark first diff file shown. This is rendering at the 4.3 mark. We're aiming to have this always, this is important, always beneath 3 seconds, not just for this MR, which means that if it's MR that has 5,000 files, this will still render within 3 seconds or earlier. So I think we'll be able to, if we recover, so coming back to your answer, if we do recover those, we'll get an approximation using this and a mix of other metrics. But we don't have a quantifiable metric except this one for perceived performance. And that's because these only starts counting when the page starts to render, which then we have to add time to first byte. I think that's how this metric is taken. I need to revise that. I shouldn't say things so surely. But so coming back to your answer, yes, that will help us paint the picture. We should spend some time writing the baseline, documenting the baseline of where we start, so that then we can write a comparison for it. But again, the benefits of this project are not just performance. The coverage is important, and the maintainability is also important for velocity. And thanks for pushing on this. It's something that Kai has been
Yeah.
pushing for the very beginning to get this sorted, like so we have a story to tell, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate. I think like getting instrumentation and measurement in early, even if it's not apples to apples, does two things. I think one, it knows where we get to know where we're at sort of like all the time, like as we add features, right? Like we get this really fast number early on because the page doesn't do anything. And then every time you add something new, like you would expect that number probably to go up, but we'll get to like know as that number goes up. And so this on top of like allowing us to sort of always tell the story, I think from an engineering perspective, it also helps you like go, oh, we just added XYZ to merge requests, and now like the number jumped like much more than we anticipated, right? And so it gives you a way to sort of like understand the changes you're making versus if you get all the way to the end and our expectations of things should have been faster or we perceived faster and they're not, like we don't even know where to start now, like where we even go look at that. So I think the sooner we like get numbers going over time, the better. And we know from history that we need to do it with like the same MR, the same commit page, the same things all the time. So like making sure we have those in place in all the test environments that will need them will also be helpful because that was
a pain.
Much harder than we thought it would be the last time we tried to do this.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. So what I'll do as an action point on that is I'll bring this up in the next technical discussion, but I also bring an issue to be scheduled, an issue or issues to be scheduled for 17.2 to cover instrumentation, tracking, early work. Yep, that's the commitment.
Oh,
That was
look
not
at
an
that.
accident. Wow. So cheesy. Stanislav, we have a point here below?
Yes, regarding these two measurements, I think time to first diff only needs backend support. So as soon as we have proper backend architecture and Kitali support for the new RPC, we can start measuring this stuff. We don't have to wait for all the front-end things. And for the page speed, I think it makes sense to have at least two features working, which is file browser and discussions. File browser, because I would like to experiment with actually loading data for the file browser with the page, not as an external call, and see how this slows page down. And discussions are kind of heavy on data usage also. They use external request. So it makes sense to measure page with these two features on it and see how it performs. Also, do you know where we store our time to first diff metric right now?
The time to first diff is a front-end metric. It's measured on the performance timings API, so it's the front-end code that is just sending that to the browser.
Okay.
The longer historical record we'll have of those will be the 10K site speed reports.
Okay.
It's a front-end thing.
So,
It's not
so
time
I
to first
guess
byte, it's time to first diff after you show it on the page.
so. We have page speed results, like you've said, running weekly or daily. And if page speed actually collects custom performance metrics, we can actually use this from the page speed insights.
It's daily,
So,
but it's not
yeah.
production stats. So remember, it's comparable. It's numbers that are comparable between each other, but it's numbers that run on an environment, a virtualized environment. It's always consistent the same, but what the other gave us would be like the numbers would be affected by incidents and stuff that happen in production. It would be a much more realistic, like user felt metric. But we
can
don't
do
store it
it as a
anywhere.
step 2. Like a step first is add another page speed entry with rapid diffs enabled, test against that, collect some metrics, and step 2, do it on production, right?
I have to check with the quality team. I don't know how they feel about adding test pages to the reports that they're running on the 10K, because that's used for many things, many other things, right? It's not just for that. So they do have a historical dashboard with graphs and stuff. So I would need to check with the team whether that's doable or we'll set up a separate test. I don't know. I have to check if that's possible. The other one, the production, we were previously able to set that up at our own will, but I think the conversation right now is at a stage where we need to pull that back into the quality team and follow a more standardized approach to make those metrics. I probably going to have to get that project off the ground. It's been just kicking down the can a little bit on the other side, so we'll try to get that going. So what my point here is all those metric gatherings, whatever, they're not necessarily blocked by any feature. We can add them whenever we have time for it or capacity for it. So for example, you say that as soon as the backend has proper Gitly support. Well, not necessarily. As long as we have diffs on the page, we can show them. Even if we don't have a file browser or discussions, we can track the metrics. And like Kai was saying, every time we do add one thing, we'll visualize exactly the delta of that change. And I think that's a great habit to have as early as possible on the project. So what I'm saying here, they're parallelized efforts. I don't think we're going to be blocking one or the other. Just going to be putting them like in parallel, if that makes sense.
So should we add those to stage 0? Like add
Yes.
them as soon as possible and just start using
We'll work on that in the next week or so that by the end of 17.1, we have something to schedule.
Okay, cool.
And we're at time. Look at this. All right, time to switch over to the technical discussions. Right, anything else last minute? We good?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
have a good day.